Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan McNeely, and I'm the Community Development Manager for ResearcHERS at the American Cancer Society. I want to thank you all for being with us tonight. It is our new program, Women in Leadership, a conversation in and out of the lab. I'm your moderator for tonight's discussion, and I'm joining you from my home in Southern New Jersey. I have a few housekeeping items before we get started with the main event. If anybody has not muted themselves and muted their audio, we would ask you to please do so now. Only our guests are going to be using those features tonight. My colleague Karen Jones is going to be helping out moderating the chat box, so please feel free to reach out if you need any help. We are recording this event tonight, so just be aware of that. For those not familiar with ResearcHERS, Women Fighting Cancer, it's a movement that shines a light on the incredible discoveries made by women. It also empowers women leaders in our community to support the American Cancer Society's National Research Program, which funds some of the brightest minds in cancer research. Simply put, it's fundraising by women to support women-led cancer research. So I want to make sure to acknowledge our generous supporters through the ResearchHERS Ambassador Program, whose funding efforts are critical more now than ever. I know that we're all navigating new and challenging times, but I'm also so encouraged to see the strong support for this really important program to advance cancer research during this time. It truly demonstrates that no matter what, we can continue to stand together even when we're apart during these challenging times. Okay, so let's turn our attention to why you've all joined us tonight. From the lab to the boardroom, women are challenging gender diversity and making critical and often life-saving contributions to our society. We're honored to have two very special guests with us this evening who are going to help us dive into this topic. Joining us live are Paige Gebhardt Cognetti, the first female mayor of Scranton, PA, and ACS-funded researcher, Dr. Emily Coe from the Abramson Cancer Research Center of the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you both and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
So I'd like to get started with a kind of easy question and ask you to share a bit about yourselves and why you've chosen to join us tonight. Mayor, if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you to the American Cancer Society for having me, and all of you have been so easy to work with as we planned for this. So thanks for having me. Welcome to Scranton, Pennsylvania via my daughter's nursery, which has become a remote city hall for the last, I guess we're at 5 months now. It's been quite a ride. I took office on January 6th, and the pandemic hit, as we all know, kind of within 10 weeks of that. 2 weeks prior to taking office, I had my first daughter. She's 8 months old. You might hear her in the background here, so my apologies. But I think it's part of why we're all here, right? Is women we just have a little bit more of the childcare burden, I think, than sometimes our partners do. Sometimes those of us have male partners do. And you know, there's the households things that we have to balance, and there's also the work and professional life things we have to balance. So it's really fun for me to be able to speak about these things and talk about what my experience has been like so far, and what I work for every day, and especially now that I have a daughter, how important it is that we talk about gender and we talk about really continuing to make strides. I think before I had my daughter, I could say, well, you know, those who came before us cut through the glass ceiling and we're fine now. But now that I have a daughter, it really makes me realize, I mean, I knew, but now I really feel confident about going out there and speaking about it, because I want to make really sure that by the time she's in this seat, that she doesn't have to deal with quite as many of the things that we all do. So with that, I'm the first female mayor of Scranton, but I'm not from Scranton. I'm from Oregon originally. I moved to Washington, D.C. actually in 2005, and wanted to stake my place in having a role in changing what I thought needed to be a new administration in Washington. So I went into politics. I found myself in 2005 up here in northeastern Pennsylvania for a campaign. Ended up meeting the father of my daughter over there, and marrying him, and was back and forth to Scranton for a very long time. So ended up settling here in 2016 finally, and got involved in the school board first, and then ran for mayor last summer in a special election. Not only am I the first female mayor, but I'm coming on the heels of a mayor who is going to prison for extortion and bribery. It's not something I love to talk about because I want to talk about all the positive things in Scranton, but we really are, that was our rock bottom, I think. And we've really, I think that I actually was put into office because people really wanted to pivot. They really wanted to change. And we had to hit that rock bottom point, I think, to maybe give people confidence that it was time for a real change. And maybe that female gender thing helped. It might have, I think, something certainly different. I do think I run things in a little bit of a different way, but that's probably more than you wanted to hear at the outset, but I'm excited to be here. And again, thanks y'all for tuning in.
Not at all. We wanted to hear every bit of it. And yeah, children in mine, I shared with the group earlier, my children have been sent away with my husband for the night. So, we all have a small village helping us accomplish things we do each day. Dr. Ko, same question for you. Will you share a little bit about yourself and why you chose to join us today? And also about your research, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. It is a total privilege to be here today. So I'm a board certified gynecologic oncologist here at University of Pennsylvania Health Systems. I'm an assistant professor for UPenn Medical School in the Department of OBGYN and the Division of Gynecologic Oncology. Additionally, I wear a couple hats. I am a core faculty member of the Penn Cancer Center of Innovation and also a senior scholar for the Penn Wharton Business School Leonard David Institute of Health Economics. As a side job, I am the co-chair of our Society of Gynecologic Oncology, which is our national medical society. So I'm the co-chair of our Health Policy and Social Economic Committee, which is, a really fun aspect of our daily work in a very different way. And as a physician scientist, my research really falls within the realm of health services research. Population sciences work, epidemiology, and clinical trials. And with the emphasis on uterine cancer, cervix cancer, but I do certainly have interest in all GYN cancers. My daily tasks include, performing complex surgeries for GYN cancer conditions, as well as benign gynecologic conditions, as well as medical oncologic management for GYN cancers. Lastly, I do have a family and 2 kids. Wonderful. It's just amazing to be able to go home. And right now, as you can see, I'm still in my office because if I went home, there would be, certainly visitors into the screen, as I can say. So that is, as we've heard from the mayor, it is a balancing act. But I think the excitement is that there is the opportunity to be able to do all these things, these days, to be able to combine all these great interests and passion and activities. I like to say, of course, I am very, very grateful to American Cancer Society, who has funded some of my research. And that really, I think, really planted a seed for additional research, additional collaborations throughout the institution, and other institutions, to really try to move the needle forward. Ultimately, we're here to try to help women with cancer. There's so much more to be done, so many questions to ask, so many more treatments to find. We have not cured cancer by any means, nor have we been able to offer, honestly, medical care and access to all the women that need it. So that is, I think that's the underlying driving force, the motivation of what we do. And certainly ACS is also has been a critical part in that journey.
Thank you both so much. I'm already inspired and we've only gotten to question 1. So, so I should mention to start with that many of the questions we're going to be asking tonight were submitted by members of the audience, so including this one. Both of you have chosen careers that have traditionally been represented by men. What drew you into those fields? And more to the point, how do you find yourself defining what leadership meant to you? Does anybody want to take that first? We can let Dr. Ko take that first this time if you'd like.
Thank you. Yes, medicine certainly historically was, dominated by males, and certainly in the realm of surgical subspecialties, that is for sure true as well. I think it was really only in the last decade or maybe two-ish that a lot more women have entered into, OBGYN. Of course, now, OBGYN is dominated by women. But I think how to navigate that, I think there have been critical mentors who have paved the way. And as I remember, as a medical student sitting in the lecture hall, and there were a few, leadership, physicians in leadership positions who were women. And I remember a couple stories they shared, which is, when they were in medical school, they could count, potentially the number of women in their classes, because, that was going a few more decades back. And especially even in surgical fields, literally, they could potentially count amongst themselves how many of them there were. So I definitely look to those folks who have paved the way, and heeded advice from them, about kind of how to navigate, how to strategize and how to balance, which is also really, really important. In terms of leadership, I would say the way I look at it is if there is a particular interest or passion that you have about a certain topic, I think there's always a way to potentially engage in a leadership role for that. I was thinking back at one point, I was Albert Schweitzer Fellow as a public service fellow servant just a few years back in college or just after college. And I remember, I think that the key is that everyone can potentially find a way to serve and to lead in their own environment or community, and that there is value in that. You don't necessarily have to be the loudest person or the tallest person. By no means am I near that. Of course, I'm sitting down, so you can't really tell, but I think that, if we find an area of interest and we try to just put our effort forth, really invest, focus and learn, and then we can try to educate and disseminate. So that's how I potentially see, my, one path to leadership and the way I manage it.
Fantastic. So Mayor, same question for you. What drew you to politics if you started in education before this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, kind of what Dr. Ko is saying about access to healthcare, right? So I don't have the talents Dr. Ko and all of you on this call would have in research and science and medicine. My talents were always in the humanities and maybe the softer sciences. But I wanted to help people always. And so the way that I felt like I could help is to fight for those who don't have what I grew up with, don't have what I'm very thankfully able to, provide for my daughter. So it's really about what can you do to help, and you have to figure out what it is you're good at. And over time, I staffed a lot of candidates, and I had the deep privilege to work in the Obama administration at the Treasury Department from 2009 through 2012. So I went from the politics side to the government side to the policy side. I was really lucky to be able to do that. And then I went to business school because I felt like I was missing the private sector experience that I would need to truly be effective throughout the rest of my career. So with the politics, the government, and the private sector's, the financial sector experience, I didn't plan to run for mayor of Scranton, but I thought at some point I would maybe want to run for office. When a school board opening came up in Scranton in 2017, I'd only lived here for 18 months, but I looked at the shape that the school board was in, realized that with my MBA, my finance background, I actually had something to bring to the table. And in that moment, I felt like I was obligated to try and help, because these these kids couldn't get what they needed if there were no finances, if the budget wasn't balanced, if there were these, if they were bleeding out money to contractors that were gotten by ill-gotten gains. So I hopped in, and that kind of led to things in the last couple of years to the seat that I sit at. But it really is all on a foundation of how can I help people that don't have growing up, or their household that they're grown into, if they don't have that leg up, if they don't have that fair foundation and that fair shot, like how can we help them do that? So it's really about justice and equity. And in this current role, it's amazing because I get to, at a local level, a city of 80,000 people, it's just the right size to have enough of a voice. I have enough of a voice as a mayor of this size of city, but we're also small enough that I think we can make a difference and we can build back that trust in government. The more trust we have that local government can do well, I think the more trust people will have going to the doctor. We have a lot of folks, and we've seen through the pandemic, who, they don't want to get vaccinated because they don't trust doctors. They don't want to go. I had somebody that works at City Hall who's a relative of theirs who they've been in contact with had COVID. And that person I couldn't ask her to go to get a test, and I wouldn't. She wouldn't go get a test because she doesn't go to doctors. And to me, and she actually worked at City Hall, like people don't trust in institutions. If you don't trust the government, you don't trust your doctor. We have a lot of trust to rebuild back. And I think that starts at the local level with government. It starts with leadership that is compassionate and real, and no BS. I sit in this chair every Friday and do a Facebook town hall. You can call in via Zoom if you don't have a computer at home. And we talk. It started with COVID. We did twice a week until we were here in Pennsylvania in the red phase. But we talk through what's going on, and we talk about issues, and I take live Q&A. And it's that leadership that I've tried to employ, and I think it's successful, where I show empathy and I don't answer questions I don't have the answer to. We try to be real with people, and we try to, again, build that trust back in. And I hope that reverberates and helps people like Dr. Koh, who I'm wanting to make sure that women go and get those tests and go and get those checkups. We want to make sure people know that the system is there to help them, not hurt them.
Wow. So you both, I've heard, really lead with your passion and have this affinity for being community minded, and whether that's a unique to women aspect, but I think it's definitely more prevalent in conversations I have with you and other women, that combination of passion and giving back to the community you live in is always kind of there. So the next one is a little bit of numbers. So I'm going to throw a bit of numbers at you guys, and then I want to hear your reactions. Approximately 20% of mayors in 2018 were female, and just 12% of the National Cancer Institute designated cancer center directors were women. It's like, what are your initial thoughts and reactions when you hear those percentages of women in leadership in your roles?
We've still got a ways to go, right? But we're on the medical side. So I'm not in healthcare, so I don't know the healthcare as much, but knowing that in the room, I was able to go to one U.S. Conference of Mayors event in December or January before, all hell broke loose. And it was a pretty male dominated, but that 20% sounds about right, like 1 in 5. And it's sad that I think that, like, oh, okay, that's not too bad, right? And then on the wow, 12% though, that's low. Yeah, we still have a ways to go. It's still hard.
Dr. Koh, anything to add to your reactions to those numbers?
I think, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. But like, the mayor said, we have a ways to go. I mean, I think there are different reasons for why perhaps there hasn't been more representation of females at those kind of top leadership positions. And that could be another hour's discussion of why that may be the case, whether it's a matter of excelling in under the realms that are measured, aspects of success to climb that ladder, to get to that, cancer center leadership position, whether it's that women have if they've, you know, self-selected to some degree to try to balance some of the competing priorities in life, you know, and at a certain point, everyone makes decisions about how much they want to dedicate to each activity in every part of the day and how many hours and minutes there are in the day. And at the end of the day, it maybe is that, you know, part of the factor about whether you choose to pursue that path to be a cancer center leader or not. I mean, I think we could go on and on and on, but what I would say is I don't think those factors should be excuses for why there haven't been more women. And I think that perhaps, like you said, maybe there's a little bit of difference in how we tend to strategize and how we tend to process and, you know, problem solve. And, you know, that may be part of it, but I think we have to we ought to keep an open mind. You know, there are many, many ways to engage change. And there are many ways to organize and many ways to lead. And so I think the opportunities, I would say, are more now than they were perhaps 10 or even 20 years ago. I mean, when I was sitting as a medical student starting medical school, I mean, I think there's certainly much, much more opportunities than there were even back then. So I think there's hope, but I think we can't just take it for granted, you know, and that we have to continue to participate, you know, as women among the men, and we all have to, you know, really take an active role in that.
So you answered our next question. So I think I might skip it unless the mayor has something to add to it. But then my next question was going to be if you can pinpoint the most significant barrier to female leadership. And I know you've kind of mentioned a few that you find to be those barriers. But Mayor, do you have anything specifically, either to your industry or just kind of the workforce more generally, that you would add as a barrier that women are facing?
I think that a big barrier is assumptions. I had it was a little bit of a heartbreaking moment a couple weeks ago. I was at City Hall. I was doing a wedding, which is a fun thing that you get to do when you're mayor. People ask you to marry them.
That's awesome.
And this couple came and they had two little boys, and one of the boys was about 7, and we all had our masks on, but it didn't matter. I mean, I don't think he would have recognized me. Why would he? It's fine. I've only been in office for 8 months, and it's been during a pandemic. But I got him this parks passport that we have. You can take the round of the parks and get stamps, and it's cool. So I gave him one, and they were actually moving here this summer and then starting new at school. And I said, well, this is, you know, so great. You've got your parks passport and you know the mayor. And he goes, I know the mayor. And I said, well, I'm the mayor. And he goes, you are? And we had a little conversation after that, and it was funny. And he did ask if I was a billionaire, like the president, which I told him those parks would be really cool. They're really cool at all, but like they would all be Disneyland if I had $1 billion. But then the next day, this was like the kicker. The next day, a little girl, I was swearing in her father as a firefighter, and her mom walked by her and she said, say goodbye to the mayor. And the little girl looked at her mom and said, that's the mayor? And it was the way she said, she was only 6 years old, but the way she said it was so incredulous. And it's just so, those assumptions that people assume that the mayor is a man, and it's not the parents' fault or the kids' fault. It's just like our whole culture, our whole society assumes that the oncologist is going to be a man and assumes that the mayor is going to be a man. And it's not one person or one entity's fault. It's just this world that we're in still. And I'm trying to figure out the ways that we like push and get through it without, because it's not I'm not angry about it. I'm just a little heartbroken by it, that we're still at that little kids are still assuming that the mayor is a man, because that means this last 6 to 7 years of life in our world, there's still enough of it that's what they're absorbing. So we have a lot to change.
All right, so I think our listeners are going to be interested to hear this next one. So how do you build that confidence and resilience over the course of your career? What kind of has helped you, keep moving forward?
I was just talking about this. I'll just keep it going before Dr. Ko speaks. I think it's that attitude, and that just like take the deep breaths and kind of drive home and don't pretend it didn't happen. Like call a friend, call your mom, call those people on your speed dial, your personal board of directors, and go through the experience. tick down kind of what does it mean? What can you do about it? Don't ignore these situations. Let them feel, feel your feelings. Let them feel bad. Like, it felt bad that was the case. Not because of me personally, just it feels bad that kids are still making these assumptions, or being fed these assumptions. But I'm trying to talk about it and learn from it and say, all right, what are the things in my days, my weeks, my years where I have the privilege of this office? What are the things I can do to help change that? So it's really keeping that positive, proactive attitude, which sounds pretty cheesy, but it works.
Positivity is never cheesy. Dr. Ko, how do you keep that resilience, and as you face these, setbacks or challenges or, adversity to growing in your career?
Yeah, I think that it's looking for a silver lining. I mean, if something doesn't quite go your way, and there are many things along, each and every day that don't exactly quite go the way that you would hope. How can we do different? How can we solve the problem? What is the problem? What is it that's making me upset about it, or making someone else upset about it? And then how do we resolve it? So I think it's yes, I agree. You need a little time to just, to think and to vent and to breathe and sigh. And, thank goodness there's someone at home, at times you can talk to, or maybe colleagues, or friends. That's super important. But I think it's kind of turning it around and saying, okay, well, what can I learn from this? How do I do different next time? If you made an error, okay, well, we accept it, and we got to figure out how do we move on and learn from that. So, and research as well, a lot of times things don't work out the way you want. And you're like, man, I spent so much time on that. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, well, what did I learn out of it? Was there something else that I can take away? Is there something else I can then move forward, take a different step? And maybe that's what we need to do, is we need to step in a different direction. So whether it's a research project, whether it's just a process or workflow at the office, or, patient care, sometimes outcomes are not as optimal as we like. But, what does that mean? And I think that's what I would take away. The other component, and this is, I have to say, I didn't make this one up, is just being grateful, for all the things that don't go our way. What was good about a particular day? What are things that we are grateful to just have, that may be simple things that we can turn to each day. And there are a lot of things that, I think that if we kind of look back and say, okay, there really are a lot of things that we are grateful for, despite everything else that's going on in the world. So I think those are probably the two ways I would look at it.
Fantastic. All right, so I have another one from our audience. What advice would you give younger women who are in the early stages of developing their leadership, and how should they ensure that their voices are heard? Dr. Ko, do you want, either one of you, whoever wants to take that first?
I'll try. And this one again, I heard it from someone else, another, female that was, I think I was a college student at the time, and I went to some forum for women. And one thing they said was that you can have it all, but you can't do it all at the same time. But I would take that, I would also modify that a little bit. I think as you go through life, you will determine what it means that's most important. Like, what does it mean to have it all? And at different ages, I think that changes. And to realize, okay, well, if I, focus on this a lot right now, I might put something else off for a little bit. And is it okay that I put that other thing off for a little bit? And at the end of the day, I think if you decide that, it's okay to do that, eventually, I think you can do a lot of the things you want. But it is hard to necessarily do everything you want to do at the same time. So
Definitely.
That's what I try to remind myself.
Yeah, in my industry, I guess we could call it, it's pretty simple. Don't let people tell you to wait your turn. That is, like, I think it's particular, well, it's for a lot of industries, but you can imagine in politics, there's a lot of, you're supposed to wait your turn, right? You're supposed to wait your turn. And I didn't have anybody tell it to me precisely last summer, just kind of over the years, participating in lots of, groups and my peer groups, and my various times in my career. Just that's something that was kind of always resonated with me. But before I made the decision to run for mayor, which was a huge decision, it was a really scary decision to make that day when I pressed send on the press release, and that was actually August 21st of last year, so it's been like a full year exactly. But through my mind, kind of in those couple days that I was really making the decision, it was like, well, don't let anybody tell you to wait your turn. Like, if you feel like it's the time to go, you got to try it. You got to apply to that school or that job, or take that job, even though you're not sure it's the right, you're just not sure. But if you got to trust your gut, and you got to not let anybody tell you that you got to wait. So.
Great advice at any stage of your career, not just when you're, starting out. And I'd say, I'm just going to throw in my advice that I have been given a lot, is giving myself grace and allowing myself to not have to be everything all at once. The dust bunnies under my, my living room can attest to that. But other things are doing great. So, you gotta have to give and take where you can. Okay, so ResearcHERS, Women Fighting Cancer, is all about women supporting one another. Women are fundraising to help that next generation of women-led cancer researchers make that life-saving change, hopefully. So I'd love for you guys to tell us about a time when either you've been supported by another female or you uplifted a fellow female yourself.
Well, I just this afternoon got a text message from the woman that I worked with when I was at the U.S. Treasury Department, and she continues to be just a mentor to me. So, and she reached out to me to check in. She has a very, very significant job, far more fancy than anything I'll ever have. But just her taking the time to check in and say, let's do a call soon. She checks in. She's always been a great mentor to me. And so I always think about her when I think about balance, because she had 3 little kids when we were working together. And she was wonderful, because it was always, the goal was always to not have to stay overnight anywhere so she could get back to her kids. And I always understood it, but I was in my early 30s and I was like, can't we just stay overnight in such and such place? Because we had to go to some cool places. But now that I have a daughter, I totally get it. But she was able to weave. I mean, it took a group of us to make sure it all worked and happened. But I learned a lot about setting those boundaries and being like, I can do this, but we got to be on that plane, and I got to get home for bedtime. And I respected that those boundaries were hard. There were hard and fast rules. And that was how she was able to balance it. So I learned a lot from her, and she continues to be a role model for me.
Dr. Co.
Yeah, definitely. I think mentors have been key to the journey. There are a lot of senior physicians who have been mentors, and some of them have been male. I mean, a lot of them have been male mentors as well as female mentors. Some of them who, for example, are more higher up executive leadership positions with our national organization. One of them in particular, just the fact that she might pull me aside and say, hey, how's it going? Mm-hmm. What can I do for you? I'm like, what can you do for me? I don't know. You're asking me, but the thought that someone else is kind of, just asking and thinking, and maybe they're asking because they do want to help you, I think that really is so meaningful. And so I kind of think to myself, well, if I take a couple seconds out to also, just ask, offer, share personal story, and I think sometimes those connections are just, it really kind of lights a fire, and it kind of starts a good kind of relationship going forward. So, and the other thing is, sometimes I think if you just act as you would want others to do, maybe there's some informal mentoring going on. I don't even realize it until afterwards. They're like, oh, I want to go into that specialty too. And it's like, oh, and maybe it's because, if you try to act on a daily basis in a way that you would want others to follow in your footsteps. I think that's a nice way to kind of informally mentor as well. So
I think that's an interesting comment. I feel like, and I have no statistic to go along with this, but just from the conversations I've had over the years with various women, is I feel like women tend to do more informal mentoring, and it's more conversational, where men typically have that more formalized, structured kind of reporting process. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's any particular reason for that? An inherent nature of women to not apply for things, or is it just a natural kind of tendency to have these interconnection and more conversational relationships?
I can take a crack at that. I think perhaps women tend to want to be more friends with everyone, and to try to just, develop that friendly relationship. So it's not so formal. Mm-hmm. But I think it is necessary to also have that formal type of mentoring as well, where, you are very clear and say, okay, I'm here to mentor you. We're going to try to, over the next X months, try to see if we can meet these, whether they're deadlines, whether they're objectives, whether they're, whatever it may be, and try to work together. And I think that's really important, actually, as well. And maybe because, are women kind of more shy about, being upfront about their goals, dreams, maybe a little bit more afraid to put it out there, but I think it's important to have the formal type of mentoring as well as the informal.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Marianne?
Yeah, I think Dr. Ko, you're right that we have a tendency to be a little bit more on the relationship side sometimes, and wanting to seeing younger people in ourselves or something. And so taking a particular interest or being a little bit more informal about things. But yeah, we need to make sure that we're using that in conjunction with harder numbers and deadlines and metrics and things like that, to make sure that whatever the nature of the mentorship was, an internship maybe, or a job, that you're setting them up for success. They can take some concrete things with them on the next step, and that we're using any opportunity. Like I think of City Hall, we have a bunch of interns, which is a new thing here, which is great. And I've tried my team. I've put really good people in charge of the interns that are able to craft a real program for them with deliverables and things that they can really hang their hat on and be able to take back to their schools and say, I did X, Y, and Z, and these were the outcomes, and try to have that structure in it, so that it's not just, oh, I had a great summer at the city.
All right. So we're getting close to the end. I know I'm pretty energized for 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, just knowing that there are incredible women like you both that are out there that are talented and just uplifting one another and doing great work in the community. So I just wanted to let you have an opportunity. If there's any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the group before we kind of wrap up for the evening.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like I said at the beginning, I used to kind of shy away from being out front about gender and women and that kind of thing, and had to, I went to business school, and there you do a lot of self-reflection and things, and there's some gender imbalances at business schools, as you can imagine. There's certainly gender imbalances in finance, but in the financial world, you're kind of you talk about it, but not really. So it was fun to get back into the public sector, where I think it's a little easier to really vocalize this and talk about it more. And being an elected official, I think it's my obligation, again, to use that word obligation, I think it's my obligation being in this seat to talk about the things that really do impact us and be honest about what's out there in the world. So be honest about the situations. I mean, I don't call anybody out and I don't make a big deal about anything. I just, we assess, and I try to think about big picture. What are the issues that I face? What's the root of those? How can I improve them? How can I guard against that happening in the future? But it's nice to be back in this space where I do feel like I have that obligation again. And maybe the public sector, maybe government is a place where we really have to take the lead. I think right now we have a political climate where we have to be pretty aggressive in fighting for equality of all types. And you can't be bashful about that. We just have to be real. And I think that the 2020 has given us all the chance to be even more real with ourselves, with our families, and with everyone in our lives, with our local cultures, our national culture, our world culture. We have an opportunity in this year to take the filter in a always respectful and productive, but kind of take the filter off a little bit and be like, all right, this is the way it is. This is the world we want to see. How do we get there? So I think we have opportunity here. I know I've grown a lot just in the last 8 months being in office, where I feel like these are the things I should be talking about as opposed to kind of keeping them inside. So I really appreciate being a part of this and being able to talk through these things with you all. And I appreciate you inviting somebody from government, because I know it's so different than healthcare in some ways, but there is a lot of overlap. And I'll continue to do what I can to build back that trust in institutions. So hopefully, Dr. Ko, make your job easier as you try to make sure that all the research and preventative medicine that's out there gets to folks before the problem occurs.
Dr. Ko.
I feel like I completely echo what you just said. Being sincere, being honest to ourselves and to each other, equal opportunities for everyone. And, when I think about that and for example, sometimes family members ask me, well, if it were your mom, what would you do? How would you treat her? And so I want to turn it around and say, if it were your mom or your sister or your wife or your daughter, would you want her to have all the opportunities? Would you want her to be treated in this way? Do you think that is appropriate and equitable and, have equal opportunity? And I think that's the underlying, I think that's the key as we move forward, in the research world, as you mentioned, and the cancer center leadership world, there aren't that many women, and still, if you look at who's funded, there's still a lot more men scientists than women. And I think the key is to say, well, are we making those opportunities available? Because I think we are potentially missing out when we're already preemptively closing the door. We don't even know what we're closing the door on. We just decided that we probably, that it would be, we're going to close the door for whatever reason it may be. But I think if everyone turned it around and said, their daughter that's growing up, right in front of them, is it fair and equitable? Is she going to have all the opportunities, that I would want her to have? And would she have all the medical care that I would want her to be able to access? Cancer care, not cancer care, clinical trials, opportunities, availability or ability to have access to the newest medications that could be life-saving, or even prolong a really great quality of life. That's not necessarily available to everyone these days. So kind of circling back to the medicine front, the cancer front, and the research front, I think that's critically important. And I think, the policy aspects are all intertwined, yeah, and it is not separate at all, actually, because, who can get to a doctor? There's a lot behind that. So that I hope that we continue to move in this, you know, positive direction where there really is equal opportunity for everyone. I really do.
So, I mean, from my perspective, you know, you guys have both talked tonight about we're all in this together, you know, no matter our careers. Everyone that's joined us today has come here today to advocate in support of women. So, you know, thank you to our speakers, but thank you to everyone else who joined us and being part of this conversation that they can take with them as they move forward in their careers and their daily lives tonight and tomorrow and moving forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't share, you know, since the beginning, women have led the way at the American Cancer Society, and ResearcHERS is just another way that we're ensuring they continue to be a part of our organization. So as we conclude, I just want to once again thank Mayor Cognetti and Dr. Coe for joining us, and thank all of our ResearchHERS ambassadors who have already signed up and are raising those critical funds as we speak. So if anyone wants to learn more about obviously getting involved and becoming part of this movement, I urge you to visit our website at acsresearchers.org/Philadelphia. You'll be all getting an email follow-up, and I just hope you all have a safe and lovely evening, and so appreciate this conversation and this time out of your very busy schedules. So have a wonderful evening, everyone.